Hello and welcome to our brand new series called The Untold Truths. Today I will be joined by my co-host Tayla and our first very special guest Pamela, who will be giving us an insight into her life and experiences that she has had during her past relationships, career as a nurse, writing and publishing her own books, and an overview of guided meditations. Pamela, it's an absolute honor to have you joining us today, and I hope that you are doing well. Me
Thank you so
myself,
much.
obviously, I am Kallum. I'm just going to give a quick introduction that I'm Kallum. I currently work in the education industry. I have been working in the education industry now for nearly 4 years. Got a vast majority of obviously like experience working with different children of all ages, and obviously I've had the opportunity to work with children who literally like have various amounts of disabilities, various amounts of abilities, and obviously having the opportunity to work along specifically, which I currently do now, special educational needs children, which I absolutely love because I'm currently actually working towards becoming a play therapist. And yeah,
Nice.
the floor is yours.
Do you want me to go?
So, yeah.
So I'm Tayla. I'm an amputee and I currently play for England and Newcastle United. And I'm in uni studying football coaching.
Awesome.
Okay. Literally, like Pamela, do you want to give us an introduction
Sure.
in relation to yourself? And
Sure.
obviously, tell our viewers a little bit more about you.
Yeah. And first of all, I want to thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here. And I hope that I will add some value for your listeners and watchers, I guess, if you're on YouTube as well. But yeah, so I'm Pamela Topjian and I am in the US. And I am a former nurse, as you mentioned. I also am a board certified hypnotherapist, although I'm no longer taking clients. But I'm also a pet sitter. And as you mentioned, a author of 2 books. And one of them, the first one that I wrote, is all about my life story and my traumatic experiences growing up, my traumatic experiences as, an adult, and how that led to a major mental breakdown. And then from there, in the end of the book, it goes through the healing process. So my main focus for that book the main reason for publishing that book was to give people hope and to know that it can get better no matter what they're going through. And even, so that people know that no matter how old you are, because I'm near 60 and the book took me 5 years to write. And I think I was 50, I was already like 56 or something when it came out. So in my 50s, so I had a major mental breakdown at like 49, 50, and about a year or two to get past that. And so I wanted to share that with the world to give people, hope and to people know that healing is possible. So yeah. And the second book is all about my nursing career and why I quit and sort of a behind the scenes of nursing.
Wow. I mean, obviously, I know the full well that there's a lot of people out there at the moment that are probably having a lot of mental struggle. And
Right.
the thing is, as well, is the fact that, I know full well in relation to not just myself, but also a lot of people that I've literally, dealt with. The mental health is a massive, massive thing at the moment. And the thing is, as well, is the fact that the biggest thing is a lot of people struggle in silence.
Right.
You know, it's like very difficult to be able to kind of like come out and talk about things, or being able to kind of like discuss stuff that you're actually like feeling, because you feel as if like, I'm not saying for everybody, but you have that feeling in relation to the fact that, you know, like you don't feel like you're listened to, or that there's that massive amount of lack of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that people are also very ashamed because they feel like,
Yeah,
how did I get here? What happened to me? Or why am I like this? Or why can't I get past this, whatever it is or was. So there's a lot of shame involved as well. And so they try to keep that secretive, and try to put on a brave face and a fake smile out there, even though they're going through something really heavy and dark within them. Yeah.
yeah.
So, and I think that when we share our stories, that gives people sort of permission to know it's okay to share their own stories as well.
100%.
So
Yeah.
when did obviously like when would you say that your first traumatic experience, or something in relation to, obviously, like, you know, you mentioned breakdown, when did
Yeah.
that kind of first happen? Was that in relation to when you first started your nursing career?
Um, no, it wasn't in relation to starting the nursing career. So my parents divorced when I was 9, and after that time, my father was no longer in the picture until I was an adult. And so, with that, my mother was raising 3 girls on her own in the 70s, or trying to anyway. And she was gone all the time, and we barely had any food. I was hungry a lot of the times. I was alone most of the time. I was very fearful. And then we had to move a lot. We were evicted a lot, or I shouldn't say a lot. We were evicted a couple times, but we moved a lot throughout my childhood. And then as a young teen, or just before I turned 14, my oldest sister was killed in a car accident. And so then also there was then, as a little bit older of a teen, there were date rapes that I endured and survived, and other sexual assaults throughout my teens. And then I also was a teen mother, and not as a result of the rapes, but from a boyfriend. But I was a teen mother, and then in my adulthood, I ended up with 2 marriages that were abusive. And I relate that to not having any guidance or, supervision, or, any example of a good relationship, or any example of being able to make healthy boundaries and learn about healthy relationships. And I was just very vulnerable. And so I attracted those types of people that were controlling and abusive. So, that was the childhood led up to those relationships. And the second divorce was, after that is when I had the major mental breakdown. And that, it was really surprising to me, because I had felt at that time that, oh, everything's going to be great now. It's just me. And I was already a nurse at that point. And so it was, I felt like everything should be great. I'm on my own, and it's just me. I don't have to worry about, those relationships, those husbands, or anybody else with the money that I was making. I was making good money, able to take care of myself. And I had that mental breakdown, and I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't realize, why can't I get over this? Why am I was suicidal. I was very anxious. I was very fearful, very much like as a child, although as a child I wasn't suicidal. But, I was very fearful, and I didn't really have an explanation as to why. So, so I was in an area that wasn't real great with mental health, and although I tried some avenues for that, it wasn't really working. But I ended up going so I don't know if your listeners or viewers are going to know about the US, but I went from the Midwest over to the West Coast. I got on a bus with a one-way ticket as sort of a last-ditch effort to move on a 3-day ride on a Greyhound bus alone at age 50. But from that was sort of the catalyst to me healing and getting help. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of a lot right there. But then, so then when I came to California, so I was in the Midwest, I was in Missouri actually, and I came to California and I went to the doctor to try to get like some anti-anxiety medication or some medication to help me sleep because I wasn't sleeping at all either. And I didn't really connect the dots as to what was going on from my whole past and everything throughout my life. Really, I wasn't connecting those dots as to why I was so anxious and everything. So from there, so then I was able to get into some therapy. I went to the doctor and he wanted me to get some therapy. So I did, and I went through therapy for about a year. And when I had moved to California, I wasn't doing nursing because I was in such a mental state that I knew I couldn't do it, but also I wasn't sure if I was going to stay there. I wasn't sure I was going to stay there in California. So, so then after about a year of therapy, then I started up my nursing again. And that's when I started writing the book, is when I was in therapy, because I wanted to connect those dots. I wanted to try to figure out, how did I get here? What happened throughout my life that brought me to this point that I am right now? Because once I was in therapy, I started realizing that all the childhood trauma stuff was sort of coming up and causing this anxiety, which I never really processed through or never really talked to anybody about. And so, it was just a culmination of everything that suddenly, was coming up and causing this anxiety and depression. So, writing the book was first for me to understand and connect those dots for myself. It was part of my own healing. It was written as a journal at first. And while I was doing this, I also then was reading other memoirs of women who had been through some terrible times and gotten out of it. And I could relate with how they were feeling. Maybe the situations were a little different, but I could relate with what they were going through and how they were feeling through it. And then they gave me hope to know that it was possible to get better. And so reading those memoirs and autobiographies were very inspiring for me. So that's when I decided maybe I should publish my book, especially since I was on the upswing and starting to go through healing. I didn't want to put out a book that was just all, trauma, trauma, trauma. You wanted to have it end on a good note, right? So, so then that's when it took me 5 years to write it, because I had to also go back and change names in there and get rid of things, and, just to make it more, to protect the privacy of other people in my life, so yeah.
So, like, how do you feel, like, do you feel as if like that was like that kind of like release for you? So you feel as if like, like that healing journey properly started when you were able to start writing about everything that you'd kind of been through?
Absolutely.
Or would you feel like, like actually being able to, when you got on that bus or that transport to the actual, like, like leaving the place in relation to where the kind of like trauma happened, do you feel like that made the massive difference, or do you think it's more so in relation to obviously like writing a journal in relation to obviously like everything that you kind of been through and being able to kind of like have that self-reflection?
Yeah, having the self-reflection and then also sort of getting it out of me, I think that's so important in the healing, because
Yeah.
it's inside you, and getting it out, whether you've talked about it with people or not, or whether you've, you know, been through any kinds of therapy or not. I think writing it all out, regardless of if you ever want to publish it or not, but I think writing it out is really very healing. And so that was a major part in my healing. I don't know if getting on the bus was part of it. I don't think I would have gotten the good therapy that I did without getting on that bus, but it's hard to say what would have happened if I stayed there. It's hard to say, but I do think that, being here now in California, my life has only been on the upswing,
Yeah.
and so, it was a good move, although it was, sort of an erratic, spontaneous kind of a, you know, you know, people were worried about me, it was like kind of a dumb move maybe, but obviously it saved my life.
Yeah, because the reason why I say that is because obviously, they usually say that when you're kind of like surrounded by that environment, and you're obviously like surrounded by things that remind you of something that whether or
Right.
not it's positive or traumatic,
Yeah.
like you're constantly being reminded of that traumatic event, or you're
Yeah.
constantly being reminded of something that's bad. So it's like if you end up kind of like leaving that environment to go to somewhere else that's completely different, like obviously, like that's why I asked that question in relation
Yeah.
to whether or not it was in regards to the actual leaving part, because you do have some people that, like they feel as if, like, say for example, they're in a specific area, and obviously like all they've got there is negative like feelings, or they've got like traumatic event
Right.
after traumatic event, and they end up leaving that area to kind of go somewhere that's completely different.
Yeah.
Like they're not necessarily reminded of it. So obviously, like, like it's that kind of, it's a psychological thing.
Yeah, and then I'm also not worried about, like, if I walk into a store, is my
Yeah.
ex-husband gonna be there, or something, or not worried that if, like, if I heard something in the house, if he was stalking, or I wouldn't be worried about that because I'm so far away that I wasn't worried about accidentally running into him, or him, coming after me in any way, or coming to my job. I mean, I had quit my job before I knew I was moving, because that was when I moved away. When I divorced and I moved away, I moved to a place that he didn't know where I was, but I was still in the same town, so so my workplace was the only place that he ever knew exactly where I would be and what time I would be. So I was very scared of that, and I quit my job. There were other reasons, but that was sort of one of the major things that I thought of that was like, oh gosh, yeah, that had me fearful. So yeah.
So, in relation to obviously, like, and this would be actually like very good for the viewers to see. Especially anyone that's either in a relationship now, who's obviously like going through something very similar, who's just very scared, or struggling to be able to speak up. Because the thing is from what I know and everything like that, is, when you're in that kind of like abusive relationship, it's very difficult to speak up because you're worried about what the outcome is going to be, or the consequences, especially like, like in relation to if you try and go to talk to someone.
Yeah.
Like, so when you first got in the relationship, did you see any signs in relation to obviously like the fact that you knew? Did you feel like did you see any red flags? Did you see anything that literally like, like might have made you feel a bit kind of like, I'm not really sure, or was it not that?
So the interesting thing is, with the second husband, I had known him as a teen, and we weren't in contact for like, somewhere between 20 and 30 years. We were not in contact at all. And as a teenager, he was a really good person. And in fact, he was the friend of my baby's father, who was never in my son's life. But he was the friend of him, and he was more concerned with how my doctor appointments went, how the pregnancy was going, how the baby is. So he was more concerned with all of that, and just being not a father figure at all, but more of like a, somebody else that was concerned and cared about what was going on with me during the pregnancy and having a baby so young. So he was a good person back then. And then when I was divorcing my first husband, he was also divorcing, and I actually had seen him on social media and sent him a message. And then we just started talking from there, and he was going through a divorce and I was going through a divorce. And anyway, I ended up marrying within a year of the divorce, and that was a big mistake. I mistook familiarity with love. I thought that this was somebody that I was really connected with and that knew me my whole life, or a big part of my life. And I thought I knew him, but actually he had changed so much that I didn't I think that it's important that even if you knew somebody long ago, they might not be that same person, and to use those same sort of safeguards that you do when you're meeting somebody new. So that was a big mistake. And I would say that I did look past some red flags, and and I don't know. I was living in a place that I had lived with my first husband for 15 years, but I was always like an outsider because it's a small kind of an area in the US, way up north in upper Michigan, actually. And some people will know what it's like up there, but maybe. But anyway, so I was kind of an outsider because I wasn't born there. So I felt like all alone. And then so he was able to move there, the second husband, and it just made me feel a little more connected, and to have somebody like my own people, there for me and with me. And so there was a lot of factors that went into getting married so quickly, and sort of connecting with him. Whereas if it was somebody new, I probably wouldn't have, with some of those red flags. But yeah. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
So, would you say, like, because obviously, like, so with everything that was obviously like going on, you mentioned in relation to, like, like the abuse and everything like that. Did you feel like you were very isolated? Did you obviously, like, like, did you have anybody that you felt like you could go to? Did you feel like you could talk to anybody? Um, and do you want to kind of give a little bit more of an insight in relation to, like, the type of abuse that you'd obviously suffered?
Sure. So with the first marriage, he was just very controlling. There was no physical abuse, it was emotional and
Yeah,
verbal abuse. And also a lot of gaslighting, which is like crazy making, saying one thing and then denying that you said it later, or, asking one thing of you and then, it being something totally different, or, even the money control. There is such a thing as like financial abuse, or
yeah,
control, over somebody. So it was that kind of a thing. And so, and he was always criticizing me and putting me down, even in front of the kids, and stuff like that. So it was during that first marriage that I went to nursing school. And that's when it was my ticket out, the way to be able to leave him and take care of myself, and gain some confidence, because I had like zero confidence at that point. But then I like to say that I jumped out of the frying pan and into the fire, because then the second husband was much worse. So there was abuse in every single way that there is abuse with him, except for the financial, because I was the one bringing in the money. But he was using a lot of that to buy things that I mean, we were always broke, and we sometimes were late on bills, and it shouldn't have been like that, because I was making enough money, and especially in that area where we were, rents were pretty low and stuff. And so, yeah. So then, so let me see. So, yeah. So then the physical abuse. So for him, the second one, he was just like shoving me and like getting right in my face, like nose to nose, yelling at me. And he was an alcoholic, which the first husband was as well, but he was an alcoholic, and he was abusing like, psychotropic medications, and that, not taking them as prescribed, and mixing things up that shouldn't have been mixed up, and stuff like that too. So he was really like out of his mind a lot of the times, and just would like throw things around the house, and like furniture even. And he would be like passed out on the kitchen floor with the refrigerator open, stuff like that. So just really, you would come home and not know who was going to be there, or what you were going to find when you got home. So he had been in and out of like mental health institutions and rehabilitation things, facilities and that. And one of the times that he was in one, I had to go into his closet and get some clothes to bring to him, because they were going to have him stay longer than first anticipated. So when I did, I found some alcohol bottles hidden. And then I started finding them all over the house. And he had already been through so much mental health stuff that that he wasn't supposed to be drinking on this medication, or at all, really. So I knew that he was self-sabotaging, and I knew he wasn't taking it seriously, and I knew he didn't really care about getting well. So after he came home from that one is when I told him that I found the bottles, and I told him that, I am working harder towards your wellness than you are, and I'm done. I'm done trying, and I'm going to divorce you. But I will wait until you get yourself back up on your feet so that you're not homeless, so you can take care of yourself. And that was a big mistake. So that's when he got physically violent, and I ended up actually unconscious on my closet floor, hiding from him, and he came in there and knocked me out. And that's when I came to, and I called the police to be able to leave. And and I had said to myself, before, when he was all, when he would be, throwing things around the house and shoving me a little bit and yelling in my face, I always said to myself, I made like a promise to myself that if he ever hit me or got physical beyond that, that I would leave. So that was my promise to myself that I fulfilled, and left when he did. But it's a big mistake to have said, hey, I'm divorcing you, but I'll wait for you to be on your feet. I should have just left or kicked him out and, let him fend for himself, but I was concerned about his mental health and his being able to be stable and stability for him. And that was a big mistake, but actually, to think about it, and, when you think back, I say that was a big mistake because it ended up getting me knocked out. But had that not happened, maybe things would have been different. And maybe, maybe I wouldn't ended up here, and my life wouldn't have been so, great now. I really truly believe that everything we go through, brings us to, if you have a life that you love now, or you're working towards a life that you love, or, if you have self-love for yourself, whatever came before that, even if it was traumatic, has brought you to where you are now. There's a lot of lessons to be learned in these things that we normally regret. So
everything happens for a reason.
I totally agree
with that completely. Obviously, it's the same thing in relation to myself. I've gone through a lot of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, it's led me to not just the person that I am today, but obviously, my current partner as well, who obviously, is incredibly loving and supportive in relation to myself, and the fact that she's completely different in relation to all the people before. And when you literally and the thing is as well is the fact that, and this is to also viewers as well, is the fact that when all you know is abuse, and all you know is abusive relationships, when you start to then get treated right, and you start to literally have someone who's really supportive, and someone who literally loves you unconditionally, and someone who is literally wants the best for you and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
You get yourself in that situation where you don't feel like that's normal, even though that
you don't know
that is
possible.
normal. You don't know, because you're always so used to one specific thing. You're always so used to whether it's physical abuse or verbal, or aggression or financial or whatever it is. And the thing is as well is the fact that then you start to then realize that it's actually when you're being treated so right by someone, in relation to myself, obviously that's the case with myself and my partner, you then start to realize that it's actually what you've actually end up suffering before, and everything that you've kind of gone through in relation to what you thought was normal wasn't normal. And in fact, it's actually a lot worse than what you originally anticipated. And obviously, in relation to myself, obviously, I went through quite a lot of therapy and stuff like that, last year and stuff. And, a lot of things in relation to what I've been taught, and, things in relation to the power and control, is a big thing. And obviously, like, you know, like being told things that it's like, you know, like makes you realize that actually like there's a lot more abuse that actually ended up happening than what you originally anticipated and what you originally thought.
Right.
And the thing is as well, and this is why I feel like it doesn't really get talked about a lot, you know. And the thing is as well is the fact that there's a lot of people out there that I know full well that are actually suffering. And I know full well that there are people there that are literally like, you know, like hiding in their rooms, or, you know, like sitting there and looking for that outlet and looking for someone or something that literally like, you know, like gives them that hope and gives them that opportunity to be like, everything's actually going to get better. Things are going to be okay. It's literally like, you know, and obviously, you know, it's okay to talk to people. It's okay to literally like, you know, like it's okay to reach out for help, because at the end of the day is the fact that there are people there that will actually like, you know, like that you can get out of it. And, you know, especially when you're in those situations and you're in that kind of thought process where you feel as if like, you know, like there's no way out of this, you know, like at the end of the day is the fact that you then start to think to yourself like, and I do apologize for being a bit dark, but you know, you start to think to yourself that it's like, you know, like this could be the death of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm also curious in relation to like, you know, like how did you manage to actually like end up getting out of that? Like, you know, like how were you able to escape?
So I had to call the police to get out. So I had come home from work and he was absolutely, you know, on a rampage. And this is after he knew that I was going to divorce him and was kind of giving him the time to, you know, get a job and get on his own 2 feet. And I had come home from work and he was throwing furniture around, yelling in my face, you know, not just throwing everything around the house. Everything was being thrown all around. I went in a room to try to lock the door, but there were no locks on it. But I closed the door and I put like a little love seat, I think, in front of it because that's what was in that room. And I tried to lock him out because he was just, you know, being really chaotic and unpredictable, and I didn't feel safe. But he came through, and it was just a constant throughout the night, back and forth of him getting in and, you know, me trying to hide and everything. And he was a truck driver, and so I had even texted one of his friends, and I said drunk, even though he was more than drunk, but I said, come get your drunk friend. And he said, don't call the police because he'll lose his driving, you know, for a truck driver. I don't know what it's like in other areas, but you have to have a certain type of license to be a truck driver, and you will lose it if you have any kind of DUI on it. And so, or any kind of criminal background, I think. I'm not sure exactly, but, you know, they said, you know, his friend said, oh, he'll lose his license, and you want him to get a job, right? You know, to be able to live on his own. And so that's why it kind of took me so long from the time I thought about calling the police to the time I actually did. But when I woke up from being knocked out on the floor of my closet, that's when I decided I need to call the police to save my life, you know, because I had tried to leave and he wouldn't let me leave. So, yeah, I got out of that by calling the police, and they let me go while they had him there, and I went to a friend's house and I never went back. So, actually I was, you know, I was trying to pack up some things just in a big suitcase and trying to pack up some things, and he was blocking the door, not letting me go. He took the keys to the car and all that kind of stuff. But it was after that then that I was knocked out and that I called the police. So yeah, that's how I got out of that one. And luckily, since I knew I was already divorcing, I was already looking for places to live. And so this one place that I did end up going to, they had told me, if you need to come sooner, it's open and free. If you need to, you know, just let us know. So luckily I slept at my friend's house for 2 nights only, and then I was able to move into that other place.
Yeah.
But then within a year I moved.
Because of obviously like, you know, like the 2 experiences that you've had in relation to obviously like relationships, did that completely put you off relationships?
Oh yeah.
Or do you feel as if like, you know, like you completely lost your trust and, you know, like everything in relation to like trust and like men in general?
I wasn't somebody that didn't trust men in general. You would think that I would be, but I wasn't. I did know enough good, you know, male friends and male people that were good people. So I didn't lose my trust in or my faith in men in general. But I did, you know, I didn't believe in love anymore. I didn't think that was possible or a true thing. I thought that was total fantasy and for the
Yeah, I
movies
thought
and
it was a
whatever. You know?
fairy tale from a
Right,
Disney film
exactly.
or something. Yeah, I know that
Exactly. Yeah.
feeling.
Right. I didn't believe it that it was possible or that it was
Yeah,
true. So I am remarried now, but I want to say that I couldn't be in this good relationship without having been in the therapy. But
yeah,
yeah, and like you were talking about the partners that you know,
yeah.
completely an equal relationship, you know, a completely respectful relationship, you know, a truly
I mean,
loving
obviously, like,
relationship. Yeah.
yeah, obviously, like in relation to myself, like, you know, like I've been through so much trauma by every
Yeah.
single person that I've literally like been with before my current partner, who I'm with now,
Hmm.
and you know, I mean, I'm the exact same, like, you know, like what I'd get myself into situations where, you know, I just distance myself from them. I didn't want to be
Yeah.
around them, you know, like obviously, like, you know, like I wanted to spend that time in relation to work, or I wanted to be in relation to like, you know, like the gym and not be around those people because they
Yeah.
make me, they brought out the worst in me, I would say.
Hmm.
Whereas obviously, like, you know, like the person that I'm with now, you know, like she brings out the best in me. Like, you know,
Right.
I mean, obviously, like in relation to obviously like yourself and you're saying about healing, I mean, you know, in relation to myself, like, you know, like I've gone now, well, me and my current partner have been together nearly a year, and obviously like we had just got engaged. Like we'd got engaged in February.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I got engaged in Singapore. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like, you know, and the thing is as well is the fact that when you've got someone that actually brings out the best in you, and you know, I mean, I was really bad off alcohol. You know, I mean, obviously,
Mm.
like. I was partying, I was drinking, I was suppressing all of the abuse and
Yeah.
the emotion, the negative emotions through alcohol, and it's surprising how much like they usually say that I can't remember what it is, but it's like, you know, like the answers are not at the end of a bottle.
Right.
I think it's what it is. And the thing is as well is the fact that, like, you know, like what you'd end up kind of rather like that's where your happiness was. It's like when you kind
Yeah.
of you know, you're chasing that, you're not just chasing that high, but you're chasing that
You're
happiness.
numbing yourself, numbing your
Yeah, and the thing
emotions.
is as well is the fact that it's like, you know, and obviously like in relation to myself, like, you know, like I was getting so, you know, like negative. I didn't want to be. I was isolating myself, literally, like, you
Yeah.
know, like from everybody, and obviously, like, you know, I was looking more forward to the weekdays than I was in relation to like the weekends.
Mm.
Whereas obviously, like in relation to now, it's completely different. You know, obviously, like my partner's from the Philippines. So I fly over to go and see her, and we literally like have that time together, and all these other things. And you know,
Yeah.
in relation to herself, it's like she brings out the best in me, you know. And obviously, like, you know, we're currently working towards obviously like building that life together, and literally, you know, I've gone nearly a year now. It'll be a year next month, in April, since I've stopped drinking, like completely
Yay.
just stopped cold turkey. Doesn't interest me anymore. I mean, obviously, like, you
Awesome.
know, like I don't want to kind of go down that route. I don't want to go down that path. I was going down a very dark path, and
Yeah.
you know, and that's what I mean. You know, like obviously, like you both mentioned about, like, you know, like things happen for a reason,
Yeah.
and obviously, like, you know, like my partner came into my life during a very difficult time, and you know, obviously, like we got talking and stuff like that, and she was absolutely amazing towards myself, and literally, like, you know, like was loving and supportive, and you know, like, and the thing is as well is the fact that it's like it's completely changed my life, and I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to admit, you know. And I know a lot of guys don't admit that, but you know, like
Yeah.
when literally like someone comes into your life and you know full well that that's the best thing that's ever happened to you, and
Right.
you know,
Right.
obviously, like you could probably say the same thing in relation to obviously like, you know, your current relationship as well, where it's like that kind of that hope and dream in relation to obviously like feeling as if like, like I want to be loved by someone. I want like, and you start to like watch movies and TV shows, and you're thinking to yourself that, is this even real, or is this all just some made up story? And
Yeah.
then obviously like, especially when you have all that kind of level of betrayal on social media where, you're seeing like all these people or all these couples where it's like, is that all just fake and pretend? And then you start to think to yourself, like, actually, like, like I want that. I don't know what that feels like. I don't know what it's like to literally, like, like be loved by someone. I don't know what it's like to, like be kind of happy and smiley and like walking hand in hand and, having those like really precious moments with each other and
Or
the more
just
and more,
feeling
yeah,
totally like yourself, whereas I've never knew myself or felt like myself or felt like I
yeah.
could be myself around my ex-husbands. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing with me is like obviously
Yeah.
like, and this is where we want to kind of get into obviously like your healing journey, because do you feel as if like like your healing journey did also massively help in relation to like your current relationship as well? Because like having someone where you've got someone who is literally like like supporting you and literally like making sure that you're always okay, and that then allows you to be able to excel at the things that you want to be able to do, and knowing that you've got that full backing and that full support, obviously like and
Yeah.
something that might have taken a while to become accustomed to, because obviously like that's something that you're not necessarily used to. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, we were together for 3 years before we got married and lived together most of that time, but we were
Yeah,
very independent. We were both very leery. We both came from terrible relationships previous. So we were both fiercely independent while we were falling in love, Um, we never, we like we both of us never expected to get married again. So we were kind of both there for each other when we needed each other. We both were supportive of each other, encouraging of each other, and happy for each other's small
yeah.
wins, and just like you talked about, enjoying each other's company. It's just so strange to whatever you're doing, you don't have to have a special date or do something, extravagant to enjoy each other's company. It's the company alone. Like, even,
Yeah, I agree.
like if he's staying up, to do something on the computer or, watch sports or whatever, and I'm going to bed early, we'll literally stand and talk for like a half an hour as I go to say goodnight to him, because we just enjoy each other's company. We
Yeah,
talk so well together, and I'm just so that's just even those little small things like that I'm so thankful of. And even, things that we might not have the same interests in some things, but
yeah,
he's completely supportive in me and I am completely supportive in him with what he is
yeah.
interested
That
in
balance
that
and
I don't have in.
equality, and
Yeah.
literally like like that opportunity to kind of just show just how much you love each other, and
Yeah.
it's the same. It's the same thing as well. And like like and that's just a way of saying that it's like like no matter what you've been through or no matter how hard things
Mhm.
are right now, like like there is
There
someone
is
out
hope.
there for everybody,
Yeah. There's hope.
and at the end of the
100%.
day is the fact that it's just that opportunity and just that hope to like be like as hard as it is, hold on, because at
Right.
the end of the day is the fact that there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. And
Absolutely.
I never believed that myself. I literally like like I never. And when you're in that situation, you never like you never feel as if like that is actually like the case. But
Right.
obviously, like in relation to both
100%.
of us, I don't know obviously like you as well, Taylor, but in relation to obviously like me and Pamela, like that's clearly shown and that's clearly proven. And obviously like I've I see in relation to obviously like like how happy you are now, especially in relation to obviously like what you've mentioned, and that just gives a lot of hope to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That
Yeah, definitely.
and the
Yeah.
thing is as well is the fact that it doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah. And one thing I like to tell people
So is
too
there
is
anything
that
you want to add as well?
I think that it's important for people to know that, life is always changing and we always think of,
Yeah,
what might happen, what might go wrong, what are the, what's the worst that can happen. But, the great things, the life-changing things, the positive life-changing things can happen at any moment just as much as the negative things that happen.
Yeah.
You know, life is changing, so whatever you're going through, it's not going to be for always, you know. And it doesn't mean to sit back and wait for life to change. You do have to take some action on your own.
Yeah.
But life is always changing, and a lot of times that can work in your favor. So as long as you keep that in mind, whatever you're going through, that it is possible for it to work in your favor for once, finally, in your life. You know, no matter no
Yeah.
matter how old you are or what you've been through or what you're currently going through. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree completely. I mean, obviously, like, look, like things get so much better. And the thing is, as well, is the fact that, yes, you might have to take, like, steps yourself.
Yeah.
But the thing is, as well, is the fact that it's like, like, just, I kind of say as well that it's like the biggest, hardest thing is when your self worth and your confidence level is so low. It's about trying to refine that self in relation to yourself. And
Yeah.
obviously, like, the thing is, as well, is the fact that, like, like, you might not think like it, but it's also the unexpected, but the positive unexpected is just around the corner.
Yeah.
And the thing is like, even though it doesn't feel like that, it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously,
Yeah.
like, like, go on, Taylor, sorry.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree. I mean, mine's a different scenario as to what you've both gone through, but mine was that I was left in pain for 6 years from the doctors. I was told that it was in my head. I was making it up. Just everything, and it took years for the doctors to diagnose me. And I eventually got diagnosed with CRPS, which is complex regional pain syndrome, which is to do with the nerve endings. But by the time I got diagnosed, my leg was black and purple. It had no pulse. I couldn't bend it or move it. And yeah, I was very suicidal. I didn't want life to go on because obviously no one was listening to me. But there was something in me that kept me going. And it was my choice to eventually have my leg amputated. And obviously that was the best decision I ever made because I'm out of pain and I'm able to live my life now. But it's so true what you say, because obviously I didn't think that there was a light out the end of the tunnel, but there was also something inside me saying that I couldn't do this to my family. I want to have like kids for myself. I want to have a family. I want to get married. But yeah, I mean, my parents were on suicide watch, and I mean, it's awful to think of that, but it was also, they wouldn't blame me if they did wake up and something had happened, but the reason that stopped me from doing anything was the fact that I would be leaving them without a child, and I just couldn't do that to them. But yeah, it was, but I do know for a fact that if the doctor I did see that said to me that if you were my daughter, I'd have it amputated. So it was like he was finally listening to me. If he had said no, I wouldn't be here today. I would have
Oh my
taken my
goodness.
own life because it was
Oh
that
my
bad.
goodness. Yeah, that chronic pain is so hard for people to live through. And I think that a lot of people that do end up, you know, passing away as a victim of suicide, you know, or taking their own lives, I think a lot of them are in chronic pain, and there's just no relief to be found as of yet, you know, and they're tired of that battle with doctors or,
Yeah.
you know, or anybody, for people to believe them even. I mean, yeah, that's huge. So yeah, I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you got the help that you needed, for
Thank you.
sure. Yeah.
But as we said, it happened for a reason, because I am a
Right.
better person because of it. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
doing what I'm doing now if I hadn't had my leg amputated. So yeah, I'm still forever grateful that it did happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned, you know, leaving your parents without a child. That was one of the things that saved me. Before I got on that bus, I was very suicidal, and one of the reasons that I didn't go ahead with those plans is because my mother had lost my oldest sister, and I didn't want her to lose 2 children. Even though she had another daughter, I just didn't want my mother to go through that again. So
Yeah.
that was the reason. I mean, a lot of people who already have children who are suicidal, they don't end up, you know, they don't end up doing that to themselves because of their children. But my children were already adults, and I felt like they would be better off without me. That I was a burden to them is how I felt. Even, we weren't living in the same place or anything. They weren't reliant on me for anything. But I felt like, everybody kind of knew, what was going on with mom, or that, they didn't know about all of it, of course, but they knew that I was going through some sort of mental
Yeah.
breakdown. But so I felt like, they would be better off without me. So it wasn't my children, it was my mother who had already lost a child. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like, like in relation to myself, like I've been like, like in and out of suicidal thoughts for a very long time. Like, like obviously not now. As we could
Yeah,
say.
you have a lot of hope for the future.
Oh yeah, definitely. But yeah, like obviously, like, like with a lot of things that obviously like I was going through before, I literally like, met my fiance. I was really suicidal. I literally like felt like I just, what, like when you mentioned about the fact that you feel as if like, people would be better off without you. Like, I know that feeling, that feeling of obviously like, like being non-existent, feeling as if like, like what, like you start to have these very weird thoughts where it's like, right, people are only going to want you, or people are only going to like, like feel like that sadness, or people are only going to make you feel seen when you're dead. It's like, but when you're alive, it's like, like you're not really kind of, you're not seen, or you're not heard, or you're not literally like, like listened to, and you feel like, like you are just basically a ghost as it is. And obviously like, like what completely and utterly like, like changed in relation to myself was actually mainly in regards to my job. I in relation to obviously like, like you'd go in and you feel as if like you had that sort of outlet in relation to obviously like, like working in the education industry, and when you've got children that are constantly coming up to you and saying about the fact that like you've changed our life, you've literally like made our life better and all these things, and just that kind of little bit to hold on to.
Yeah, it's great to feel like you've had a positive impact on somebody. That really helps you to gain that self-confidence and feel like you're worthy of life even. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, and that leads on to obviously like, like my next question in relation to obviously like you mentioned about the fact that you were in the nursing industry, and obviously like, like I know that you've had the opportunity to obviously like speak to patients, and you've had the opportunity to kind of be in that environment. Did you feel like that was having a positive impact in relation to yourself, because you feel as if like, like you're actually making a difference in other people's lives?
Well, I think that the nursing industry is probably different in the UK as it is here in the US. And one of the reasons one of the reasons I left is because I did not feel like I was doing good for my patients, because we were always overworked and understaffed, and a lot of times we didn't have the things that we needed for our patients, as well as the whole industry. And I'm just going to say, as a disclaimer, in my opinion, in my experience, from my perspective, the whole industry is corrupt, and it's really, patients are treated as well as the amount of, how good their insurance is, how much money the facility or the hospital or the company can get from them. So yeah, I never felt like, I shouldn't say never. There was probably some cases that I felt like I was doing good for my patients, but for the most part, I did not. I did not go home feeling like I did good for them, and I did not feel good about what I was doing, because the things that were lacking were out of my control. And then I was being asked to do things by people higher up than me, bosses, asked to do things that were unethical and that were not things I should be doing, and things that I could lose my license for too. So no, I did not feel good about being a nurse for the most part.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because obviously, like, you know, like, I know full well as well that obviously, like, you know, in relation to myself, like, you know, like, I've actually been let down quite a few times by the NHS, by doctors
Me too.
specifically. Like,
Yeah,
obviously, like, you know,
right,
like,
right.
I was just about to
For
say,
sure.
like, you know, like, Tayla, you literally, like, mentioned, obviously, like, about that kind of, like, incompetence, should I say, by obviously, like, you know, like, the doctor and stuff. And, you know, I mean, you're hearing that a lot more, especially, like, obviously, like, in the UK, you're hearing that a lot in relation to, like, you know, like, NHS doctors. You know, I'm not saying they're all bad, because
Right.
that's not the case, but you know, I mean, in relation to myself, and obviously, like, I'm not going to get into the kind of politician side of things, but like, so when I was younger, and I'll explain. So I literally, like, you know, like, was playing rugby on a street, which is just not the best of ideas, but you know, and I spiral fractured my left ankle, and I went to a hospital. And a British doctor actually ended up reading the X-ray wrong. Thought it was just a sprain, but it actually turned out to be a spiral fracture. And I had a letter that was sent to my mum, saying about the fact that they read the X-ray wrong. And ever since then, I've had problems with my left ankle. Obviously, like, you know, like, it's resulted in potential, obviously, like, you know, like, slight Sherman's disease / scoliosis, because obviously, like, you know, like, you're trying to kind of balance out, you know, like, the kind of, like, the balance of your actual, like, you know, like, body position. And but the thing is as well is the fact that obviously, like, you know, like, and I was in a lot of pain. I know obviously it's not as much pain as obviously like Tayla was with everything that kind of went through. But you know, I actually ended up going private, and I managed to get in with two of the top doctors, orthopedic surgeons, in relation to, like, you know, like, in the country. And they actually were from, if I remember correctly, they actually were from Pakistan. And the thing is as well is obviously, like, you know, like, and the thing is, and this is like what I'm also going to mention as well, that, you know, like, doctors and literally, like, you know, like, especially like staff members that have come over from different countries, you know, and obviously, like, want to work in this country and work for the NHS. Like, it's surprising how much they actually, like, how competent they are, and the fact that literally, like, you know, like, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure that their patients are being taken care of in the best way that they can. And that is that's from my own experience in relation to obviously, like, you know, like, the fact that the actual staff members that I've actually, like, encountered are actually from different countries, not necessarily from this country, and they make a massive difference. And I think it's more so in relation to like, that cultural upbringing, and that upbringing in relation to obviously, like, how they're being brought up, which makes a massive difference.
I think too, whatever the rules are, whatever the country, you know, like, I don't think a doctor from somewhere else, or regardless of where they're from, I don't know that they could work in the US, just have a private practice and not still have to adhere to the rules and the laws of, you know, the healthcare system. So they're still always going to be under that. You have to travel if you want to get a doctor that isn't under the umbrella of the US healthcare system.
Yeah, I don't really know how the healthcare system works, but obviously, like, I know the difficulties in relation to the fact that if you don't have the money, then obviously, like, you can't necessarily afford the treatment, which is, I think that's quite difficult. And I think obviously, like, you know, like, from being that just that constant anxiety, which, you know, it's like, oh, okay, like, you know, like, obviously, like, that money worries, you know, am I going to be able to actually afford for like the simplistic side of treatment, whether it's medication or anything of the sort. And obviously, like, you know, like, just that kind of leads me into obviously, like, you know, like, that next point was obviously like I did see that you had kind of found guided meditation.
I am a hypnotherapist. And so on my YouTube channel, I had done a lot of guided visualizations and meditations to kind
Yeah.
of help give a little bit of a taste of what I was doing with hypnotherapy. Now, none of those are hypnotherapy sessions, but it's very similar. And so, yeah, that's I still, like, I have 2 coming up where I'll do group guided meditations. And learning that through my hypnotherapy, was kind of very healing for myself as well. But yeah, it can be very, very helpful no matter what you're going through, or even if you just need to relax once in a while, or just for somebody who's always anxious and never knows how to relax or can never quiet their mind. Sometimes just a guided meditation will be all you need, especially like if it's on YouTube or if it's online anywhere. There's some great apps that have guided visualizations and meditations and that. But especially if you're at home and you can feel safe and secure in your own space, and you can have that control of to turn it off if it's not feeling right or whatever. Also, if you're going somewhere for a hypnotherapy session or whatever, if you're going somewhere, then you still, after the session, have to get back in your car and drive home, and that kind of takes you out of that headspace of the of that, they will call it trance, but that deep, that it's a deep physical relaxation, but your mind is more focused on whatever it is, the healing, or whatever you're trying to work on, or the healthy habits you're trying to incorporate, or the unhealthy habits you're trying to get rid of.
So how did you come across hypnotherapy? Like what made you want to go from nursing to becoming a hypnotherapist?
So first of all, while I was still in my second marriage, and I was a nurse for only a couple years when I realized what it was really about, and already knew that it wasn't really, something that I wanted to stay in long term. So I went to a college for holistic health, the healing arts for holistic health modalities. And I took a course that had a bunch of modalities within it, just to sort of give you an intro, because you don't, for somebody who didn't know what all those different modalities were. And hypnotherapy was one of those, and I really fell in love with it. I had a knack for it. I'm confident in my skills as a hypnotherapist. I was always getting good feedback in that. So but also, it was really helpful for me. Like, I really got a lot out of the sessions myself, even just practicing with other students. So I just went on to do more hypnotherapy courses and classes and go through the training. But I wasn't able to switch out of nursing at that point because I was still with that second ex-husband, who now ex-husband, and still had to bring in the money from nursing for us to be able to live. So I wasn't able to make that switch. So then after I came to California, after the divorce, after the mental breakdown, after the move, then I was nursing for a little while, for a few years, and started falling back into like a depression and anxiety and that, and just knowing, even though I had sort of been through therapy for the breakdown, I was starting to feel these things again. And then I had to step back and look at my life and like, what am I missing? What's causing me the most stress, that kind of thing. And the nursing career was a huge part of that. So that was 2019. I started taking more classes to become certified in California, and took more classes and courses and training, and while I was in my nursing. But then 2020, the world shut down in 2020 and 2021. So then my nursing license, it has to be renewed every 2 years. So in 2021 was the time it was supposed to be renewed. Well, I was already off of work because of the pandemic, and I was already a hypnotherapist and taking clients through Zoom, and it worked really well. And I was busy with clients in 2020, 2021, even 2022. 2023, it started dropping, and kind of like a little, like a roller coaster. Sometimes I had clients, sometimes I didn't. And then this past year, it was just kind of kind of dropped off almost completely. But so, you know, I just did a video the other day about why I'm contemplating stepping back from hypnotherapy. But so then that gave me the chance, and I was married to my husband, and he had the ability to work at home, so we didn't really have to worry about that. And I could let that nursing license go finally, because I had always renewed it every year or every 2 years that we needed to renew it, and you needed to get you know, educational credits. So you had to keep learning things and turning that stuff in to be able to get renewed, and then of course pay money. They always want money. So in 2021 I was able to just let it go and continue on with the hypnotherapy. And then I was doing pet sitting on the side with that, and then now I'm doing pet sitting like full time. I'm pet sitting all the time, and I love it. So
Love it.
So, what did
Yeah.
your hypnotherapy, like, what does a typical hypnotherapy session entail? Like, is
Well,
that more or less like kind of like one-to-one in like a room, or is it more like so in relation to like
there's
live?
several different ways to do it. So I was doing it through Zoom, and when I first started the training, they were saying not until you're much more experienced should you do it through Zoom. You know, you should be doing it in person, and whether you have an office or a space that you can use as an office, or like, you know, a lot of hypnotherapists will work within a spa for other holistic modalities, and you have your space, you know, or renting a room in a spa, so something like that. But it will so it'll be different with each hypnotherapist. So some of them are also coaches and other things as well. So you'll go through an initial sort of meeting and introduction call, and to see what your issues are. Are you highly anxious and you don't know why? Are you depressed and you don't know why? Or maybe you do know why and you just can't get past it. Or, you know, there's all kinds of things. People come to hypnotherapy to quit smoking, to lose weight, or, you know, for addiction issues, or they've been through therapy, you know, for many years, and just feel like they're not getting anywhere, or maybe they are, but there's like a certain area that they're stuck in and they can't get past it. So hypnotherapy is not meant like psychotherapy where people go for years. With hypnotherapy, it's more of, you know, you'll have a few sessions, and if something's really stuck or if you're not getting there, it might be a few more sessions, but it really doesn't go for it's really not the kind of thing that you continue to go to. And it is just, you know, we relax the physical body, and then we ask the subconscious mind to focus in on, you know, whatever your issue is. Some people are more visual, and so we can use like a whole scenario of, you know, like writing something in this, like you're on a beach and we relax you that way, and then you're writing something in the sand, and then the wave comes and gets rid of it, you know, and you can visualize all that. But other people are not that visual, and so we just ask the subconscious mind to clear away, or, you know, to get rid of those blocks, you know, whatever they are. So it just depends on each person on how the session will go, and it also depends on the hypnotherapist on, you know, how the session will go.
Wow. I mean, obviously, like, you know, like I know about like you mentioned about like the subconscious mind, and obviously, like, you know, like I know a thing or two about Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytic theory, which obviously like explains in relation to obviously like, you know, like the conscious and the subconscious mind in
Yeah.
relation to like, and obviously like how that kind of works. Don't really understand it, but obviously, like, you know, like you probably understand it a lot better than I do.
Well, you're not alone in that, and that's part of the problem with having a hypnotherapy practice, is that even scientists don't fully understand the subconscious,
Yeah.
you know, or even how the mind works for that
Yeah.
matter, you know. So yeah, so it's hard to explain, and it's also hard to sometimes understand,
Right.
and that's why a lot of hypnotherapists will give like one free session just so you can kind of get an idea and see how it feels before you start paying for sessions.
So, what would you say was your best experience and worst experience in relation to obviously like, you know, like your time as a hypnotherapist?
My best experience would be like, you know, when you see somebody that really has big changes, that their whole life changes, after a few sessions, and they reach their goals. That's the best, really. And I had, somebody that was going through recovery, addiction recovery, and they obviously had been through other therapies and that, but they also came to me for hypnotherapy. And one of the clients said that he has been on many trips with LSD, but he never was on a trip like that before, like he was with the hypnotherapy. So it had taken him deep, but then there was also a lot of healing in there, within the sessions, and he was able to, that was kind of the last thing he needed, because like I said, he had been through other treatments and that was kind of the last thing that he needed to really, like, okay, finally let this all go, and to know that it's possible to live without, whatever he was addicted to. So that was really nice. And somebody that was, an older woman who had skin conditions her whole life, tried all different kinds of medications and everything. And we finally, with just like, I think it was 3 sessions, it was gone.
Wow.
So yeah. So even something like that how can you explain that? Yeah, we don't know how that works, but it worked. So that was really nice. And then some of the worst experiences. So this didn't happen to me, but this was with a colleague, or another hypnotherapist that I had went to school with and I know well. She had a client that was suicidal, and we'll get clients that are suicidal, but they have been through other therapies and stuff, and it just wasn't really breaking that feeling for them. And so sometimes that's something from childhood or something really deep, and maybe the therapy is getting a little bit of that out, but the hypnotherapy will get to the core of it. But so the person was suicidal, and they still ended up taking their own life. And the hypnotherapist, my friend, felt, like she wasn't equipped to help people that really needed, help with deeper issues, and it really affected her. So that kind of affected me in a way too, that, that was hard for her to deal with, and seeing her go through that was really difficult. But one of the worst things about it too, for me, is always having to, like, for a new client that comes, you always have to explain what it is. It's like everybody kind of knows what, if you're going to somebody for yoga, you're going to somebody for Reiki or something, another kind of alternative therapy, usually they're going to them because they know what it is and that's what they want to do. But people come to hypnotherapy not knowing what it is, but it's almost like a last ditch effort kind of a thing. And, so you're working with people that are almost always leery of what you're doing and worried about what you're going to do to them or something, when you're not doing it to them. It's more of, you're the guide guiding them into themselves, or you're the facilitator, bringing them into a state that they, can't or weren't able to access on their own before. And then, you kind of can teach them how to do that on their own as well.
Yeah, because obviously, like, do you feel as if, like, like that had a massive positive impact on your own healing?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because we had, in both of the trainings that I went through, we worked on each other a lot, so I was receiving hypnotherapy as well as giving it, as facilitating it. So yeah, it was very helpful in my healing, as well as I've always been somebody that meditated on my own. So this gave me the information of how to sort of meditate, with a focus, with an intention, rather than just meditating and trying to quiet that mind. But it gave me a way to work on things going on in my life.
Do you want to add anything, Tayla?
No.
So in relation to, obviously, like, like, because you mentioned about the fact that you've written 2 books, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what made you feel as if, like, like, and how did you get into, obviously, like, becoming a publisher and obviously, like, a writer?
So when I was going through that after the mental breakdown and going through therapy, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned that I was writing everything out in a journal for me to kind of connect those dots and to kind of figure it out for myself, what happened to me, what brought me to this point that I'm feeling this way. And once in therapy that we started talking more about the childhood stuff, which I never, ever considered I thought, well, we were in poverty, we were poor, that's the way we lived. It wasn't really, those are the things that happened to me. Those are the kinds of things that happen to you when your father isn't in the picture or you don't have any adult supervision or guidance or anything. So it was just kind of like a matter of fact kind of thing in my mind. I didn't think of it as neglect or even any kind of abuse. And so writing it all out kind of, gave me that, understanding of what happened in my life and how it connected to where I was at that point. So then, like I said, after I started healing and wonderful things started happening in my life, then I decided maybe I should go ahead and publish this because it's an inspirational story. And there were, other books that I had read that were inspiring for me. So then with the second book, though, so that first book is called I Didn't Come This Far to Only Come This Far. And the second book is called Behind the Mask, Gloves, and Scrubs, One Nurse's Journey. And I had put a little bit about the nursing, in that first book, but it wasn't focused on that, So people were asking me more about that after I had, been on other podcasts and talked with people, and people had read the first book. And, having a nurse that quit, usually nurses like retire as a nurse, right? So people were asking about that more, and I thought that could be a whole book in its own, so I started writing it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Have you got any plans for obviously like wanting to continue publishing and writing?
Yeah, I do have another book in the works, actually. It's kind of like I don't know, like tattoos. They say, you can't have just one, it's like you kind of catch that little bug of, being, wanting to write things out. And, it's so yeah, I do have another one in the works, and that one actually I'm going to have a pen name for, just for my own safety and privacy. But it's about a bad situation that I found myself in when I first came to California. I didn't have the best decision making. I was not in my right mind, and I ended up in a bad situation. And luckily I got out of it pretty quickly. But that's a whole story in itself. That's a whole book in itself. So yeah, that's the third one I'm writing.
I was going to say, want to give a sneak peek? a sneak peek in relation to obviously like those experiences.
Well, I had taken, so when I first came here, before I came here, I was looking for jobs that were live-in jobs where you could live in the place, like either whether it be somebody who had a business in their home, or somebody who, for caretaking, caregiving, or pet sitting or house sitting, stuff like that. So I didn't have to start, paying rent or anything right away when I came here. So jobs where I could make some money and have a place to live and work at the same place, right? So so the first place I came to, it was somebody that took advantage of a woman in a vulnerable situation, and what I came to wasn't what was presented to me before I came here. And it was like I said, it was a dangerous situation, and just a creepy internet guy. So you can use your imagination. Worse than creepy, I should say. But yeah, a predator that knew that I was prey. But I got out of it pretty quickly, so proud of myself for that. Yeah, so it ends good. So that's what makes a good book. It has to end good. It could be a hard read, like definitely not for anybody under 18, but and graphic and a hard read. But at the end, it's better. So yeah.
So what would you say would be like, out of all of your like everything that you've experienced, and obviously like like the journey that's taken you from obviously like I'm going to say ACEs, which is obviously like the adverse childhood experiences that you had growing up. like, what would you say would be the kind of biggest lesson that you have learned upon throughout your whole journey in relation to, obviously, like, like from childhood to where you are now?
That we all matter, that your voice matters, that you can do whatever you want to do, to have confidence and faith in yourself. Most of my life until after that mental breakdown, I did not really feel like I mattered, or that I had a voice. I didn't even know myself fully, honestly. And so, I think that that's the most important thing. I think, what was it that when it comes to relationships, any kind of relationships, even if it's a job or friendships, or even family, if you don't feel safe around somebody, or you don't feel like you can be fully yourself around somebody, those people don't belong in your life. You have to have that self-respect and self-confidence to know that people who make you feel unsafe or unsure of yourself, or people who make you feel like you can't say whatever you want to say or be who you truly are in front of them, they don't belong in your life.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I agree so much
Big
with that.
lessons.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Like, basically, like, cutting out the people who are not a good influence in relation to yourself, because of the fact that those people are more or less going to be the people that are going to be either dragging you down rather than lifting you up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to say, school does not teach you that. Like,
Right.
believe it or not,
No.
like, like, the biggest thing is the fact that life is just one massive lesson. And the thing is, as well, is the fact that, like, throughout your whole entire life, all you're going to be doing is literally, like, be having lessons after lessons after lessons. And the fact that literally, like, like, what, as soon as you end up leaving school, or you end up leaving, like, college or university or something like that, that's when the lessons, like, the main true lessons in relation to, obviously,
Right.
like, like, yourself actually start happening. Of it. And
Yeah.
the thing is, as well, is the fact that, like, like, to all the viewers out there, the basic, like, summary of everything is the fact that, like, things do get better, and the fact that it's just more or less about just holding on, and literally, like, like, obviously, like, being able to use everything that we've all talked about, and saying about the fact that things do get better, and it's just about never giving up, but also trying to hold on to the very positive things that you have, or that you feel like you can hold on to, because those are going to be the things that actually get you through everything that you're facing.
Yeah.
And it shows that anything is possible.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I
massively.
love that.
Anything is
Yeah.
possible.
It truly is. It truly is. I would have never thought that I'd be living the life I am now. Never in my wildest dreams.
No.
So, yeah.
No, I'm the same
And
as well.
it's like, with or without a disability, anything's possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great message.
I agree. Right. I think literally, like, like, for now, we should leave it there. Pamela, it was amazing to have you on, and obviously, like, like, for you to share your story with us. Tayla, like, I appreciate, obviously, like, like, you being on as well, and obviously, like, like, helping me out in relation to today. And yeah,
thank you, Jordan.
awesome.
Thank you, Kallum. We appreciate you for stepping in for Jordan and helping host. And thank you.
It's great to meet you both. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Pamela.
It was amazing. That's amazing. Thank you all so much. And until next time, guys.
Yes.
Right.
But yeah, we try to be that group that can help be there for the players as a three, because I think you mentioned earlier, you want to have different characters in the changing room. You want to have different personalities. You don't want the same kind of people, because you're not going to be able to move forward. If you've got 10 people and they all agree the same things, you're going to get to a point in time where actually you're going to become unstuck. You need that one person to actually be like, nah, I don't agree with that. Or actually, we should try this. And I think that's why the huddle works, is we're all quite different as human beings. And I think you need 3 different people in there, because some players will naturally gravitate towards me and my personality. but equally some might go to the other two, and that's absolutely fine.